So, how do you build a society that can actually hold its most powerful people accountable? It's a huge question, right? One of the oldest and toughest questions in politics. The answer, it turns out, isn't about finding perfect, saintly leaders, because let's be real, that's not going to happen. It's about architecting a system, designing it so well that it stops anyone from getting total control. It's about building a structure for freedom. Okay, let's get into it. So let's just start with the main question right out of the gate. If you wanted to build the ultimate firewall, a fail-safe to protect freedom from being swallowed up by unchecked power, what would that firewall even look like? This is the exact problem that founders and philosophers have wrestled with for centuries, and the answer is surprisingly elegant. But before we can really appreciate the solution, we have to get a handle on the problem. Why is this firewall so absolutely critical? Well, because power, just by its very nature, is incredibly dangerous when it's all piled up in one place. And that specific threat, it has a name: tyranny. It's that situation where all the authority, the power to make the rules, enforce the rules, and judge people by the rules is all held by one person or one single group. And when that happens, the loss of liberty and the rise of oppression, they're pretty much inevitable. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory from a textbook. It is a brutal, hard-learned lesson from history, proven over and over again. The source material here is crystal clear. When you gather all the power in one spot, it will, eventually, be abused. It's really not a question of if, but when. The pattern is just undeniable. This slide just illustrates that consequence perfectly. Think of it like an acid. As all the different streams of power, making laws, enforcing laws, judging laws, as they all merge into one giant pool, the very foundation of our individual liberty just starts to dissolve. The two things, concentrated power and personal freedom, they just can't exist in the same space. Okay, so if that's the danger, what's the solution? What's the design for liberty? How do you build that firewall we've been talking about? Well, it takes a very specific, intentional plan, what you could call an architecture of accountability. And here it is. The answer isn't just, hoping for good leaders. No way. It's a structural design, a blueprint known as the separation of powers. The big idea here is that freedom doesn't happen by accident. It has to be carefully and deliberately built. So how does this architecture actually work? It's pretty brilliant in its simplicity. You take the main jobs of a government and you put them into separate competing hands. So for instance, in the US system, you've got a legislative branch to make the laws, an executive branch to enforce them, and then a judicial branch to judge them. The key is that no single group gets to control that whole process from start to finish. It forces them to work together, to compromise, and to always keep an eye on what the other branches are doing. This slide just lays out the difference perfectly. On the one side, you have concentrated power, which, as we've seen, leads to abuse and just follows the will of one person or group. But on the other side, divided power forces accountability. It protects liberty. It requires cooperation. Sure, it might slow things down sometimes, but that friction, that's a feature, not a bug. That's the safety mechanism kicking in. So you have to wonder, where did this incredible idea of separating powers even come from? It might feel like a modern political invention, but its roots go much, much deeper. This whole concept of shared authority, of checks and balances, it's actually grounded in a foundation of ancient wisdom. At its very heart, the entire structure is built on this one non-negotiable principle. Anyone who holds authority over other people must, themselves, be held accountable. Period. Nobody gets a free pass. And that's a moral statement just as much as it's a political one. And the source material points to this timeless piece of wisdom to really drive the logic home. What a fantastic metaphor, right? One person or one branch of government can be overpowered or corrupted pretty easily, but two, they can defend themselves. And a cord of three strands, legislative, executive, judicial, woven together, that is incredibly strong and really, really hard to break. And here you can see how that ancient wisdom provides the moral and philosophical blueprint for the political architecture we've been talking about. The idea of shared authority isn't just a clever political trick to stop tyranny. It's a deeper statement that accountability is absolutely necessary for any just leadership. It argues that real lasting strength is found when we work together, when we depend on each other, not when we consolidate power into a single vulnerable point. Okay, this brings us to what might be the most important part of all. Understanding this architecture is one thing. But how do we, as citizens, actually help maintain it? How do we put this wisdom to work in our own lives? The source gives us a really clear three-step plan. First, Learn. Know what the constitutional roles of each branch are supposed to be so you can spot it when those lines get crossed. Second, watch. Keep an eye out for any signs that power is being consolidated. That's the ultimate red flag. And third, foster humility in our leaders. Now, the source suggests prayer, and for many people, that's the bath. For others, it might be public reflection or demanding transparency. But the core idea is the same. Humility is the essential antidote to the corrupting influence of power. And this is the final takeaway, the bottom line. We can't take any of this for granted. A system of accountability is not a perpetual motion machine. It runs on the vigilance of its citizens. This structure for freedom was intentionally designed, which means it has to be intentionally defended by every single generation. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. As you look at the world around you, in your own community, in our nation, and globally, which way does the current seem to be flowing? Is power becoming more concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, or is it becoming more divided and more accountable? The answer to that question has some pretty profound implications for the future of liberty.